Somebody just became the world's first trillionaire. Not a billionaire with a few extra zeros. A trillionaire, the richest human being who has ever walked this planet. And it happened in a single, explosive afternoon on Wall Street. The number is so big your brain can barely hold it. Today we're breaking down exactly how it happened and why it might not last. First, let's get our heads around what $1 trillion actually means. A billion seconds is about 32 years. A trillion seconds is over 31,000 years. If you spent $1 million every single day, it would take you almost 3,000 years to burn through 1 trillion. That's the line one person just crossed. It's almost impossible to imagine. The catalyst was SpaceX. On June 15th, the company finally went public in what may be the biggest IPO in history. Shares surged at midday after what analysts called a blockbuster debut. The valuation didn't just impress investors. It rewrote the record books. And it sent one man's paper fortune screaming past a number no human had ever touched before. If you've watched this channel, you can guess the name. Elon Musk. The same man who runs Tesla, the same man who bought Twitter, the same man building robots and rockets and brain chips. On paper, at least for one wild afternoon, he became the world's first trillionaire. CNBC even put it in their morning headlines. The line had finally been crossed. But here's where it gets interesting. Becoming a trillionaire isn't about cash in a bank account. Musk doesn't have $1 trillion sitting and checking. His wealth is locked inside the companies he owns. And when SpaceX exploded onto the public markets, the value of his stake exploded right along with it. That's how the impossible suddenly became real. Let's rewind to understand the setup. For years, SpaceX was the most valuable private company on Earth, worth around $1.77 trillion. But private valuations are squishy. They come from negotiated funding rounds, not real-time markets. Nobody could buy or sell those shares freely. The IPO changed everything by letting the entire world set the price in seconds. When the opening bell rang on the SpaceX debut, demand was ferocious. Investors have been waiting years for a chance to own a piece of the rocket company that launches most of the world's satellites. The stock didn't just open, it surged. By midday, the market value had blown past expectations, and Musk's slice ballooned with it. But there was a second engine firing under all of this. The same week, the United States and Iran announced a framework to end their war. Oil prices crashed. Stocks soared worldwide. The Dow hit a new high, and the Nasdaq jumped nearly 800 points in a single session. Suddenly, the entire market was on fire, in the best way. Think about that combination. The biggest IPO in history landing in the middle of a massive peace rally. It was a perfect storm of optimism. Tesla shares ripped higher. SpaceX rocketed. Nvidia jumped as markets soared on peace hopes. Everything Musk touched was suddenly worth more. And the math pushed one man across the most famous threshold in finance. Now you might be asking, how can paper wealth count? It's a fair question. When economists track the richest people on Earth, they add up the market value of everything they own. Stocks, stakes, real estate, the works. Musk's fortune is dominated by Tesla and SpaceX. When both spike on the same day, his net worth goes vertical. Here's a stunning fact from the IPO coverage. SpaceX's public debut revealed just how concentrated wealth at the very top has become. A single company going public moved one person's fortune by hundreds of billions of dollars in a few hours. That's not a salary. That's not a bonus. That's the raw power of owning equity at planetary scale. Let's talk about how Musk even built this position. With Tesla, his pay packages were tied almost entirely to stock options. No giant cash salary. Instead, he got the right to buy huge blocks of shares if the company hit insane targets. It hit them. With SpaceX, he was the founder, holding a massive ownership stake from day one. That structure is the secret weapon of the ultra-rich. They don't get paid in cash that gets taxed every year. They hold founder shares and options that grow quietly, sometimes for decades. Then one event, an IPO, a product launch, a peace deal rally, sends the value soaring. And on paper, they leap into a different universe of wealth. But now for the surprising twist. Being the world's first trillionaire on paper does not mean Musk can spend $1 trillion. Far from it. If he tried to sell his shares to cash out, the price would crash. Selling massive blocks floods the market. The very act of cashing in would destroy a big chunk of the fortune. It's a strange kind of wealth. It exists, it's real, it's tracked by every financial outlet on Earth, but it's frozen in place. To actually use it, Musk borrows against his shares. Banks lend him billions, using his stock as collateral. He spends the loans, not the stock. The trillion stays locked, working as a giant security deposit. This is why the trillionaire milestone is more symbolic than practical. It's a headline, a record, a marker of an era. But it tells us something deeper about the modern economy. Wealth at the very top isn't measured in dollars spent. It's measured in ownership, in how much of the future's most valuable companies you happen to control. And SpaceX is exactly that kind of company. It dominates the launch business. It runs Starlink, beaming internet to millions across the globe. It's building Starship, the rocket Musk wants to send to Mars. Investors aren't just buying today's revenue. They're buying a bet on owning space itself for the next 50 years. Now let's add some context that complicates the celebration. SpaceX is wildly valuable, but it isn't wildly profitable. Reports last year suggested the company actually lost around $5 billion while being valued near $1.77 trillion. That's the kind of gap that makes old-school investors nervous. Sky-high valuation, real-world losses. Sound familiar? It echoes the dot-com era, when companies with huge dreams and tiny profits commanded enormous valuations. Some of those bets paid off spectacularly. Others vaporized. The question hanging over the world's first trillionaire is simple but heavy. Is this fortune built on solid ground, or on a wave of optimism that could recede just as fast? The Iran peace deal makes this even more delicate. Markets soared on hope, not on hard numbers. Oil fell, stocks leapt, and the whole rally rode on the assumption that the framework holds. But frameworks can fall apart. If tensions flare again, oil spikes, and that euphoric surge could reverse in days. Paper trillions can shrink fast. There's a famous Wall Street saying, stocks climb a wall of worry. Right now the market is climbing fast, with earnings brightening and the economy holding firm, according to wealth managers. But the higher you climb, the further you can fall. The trillionaire crown sits on top of that wall, and the wind up there is fierce. Let's zoom out and ask the bigger question. What does it mean for one person to be worth $1 trillion when entire countries have smaller economies? Musk's net worth now rivals the gross domestic product of whole nations. That's an astonishing concentration of value in a single individual. And it didn't happen by accident. It happened because we now live in a winner-take-all economy. The biggest companies, the ones touching billions of users and reshaping industries, capture almost unimaginable value. NVIDIA went from $12 billion to $5 trillion. SpaceX redefined space. Founders who own large stakes ride those rockets straight to the top of the wealth charts, faster than anyone in history. And the SpaceX IPO sent a powerful signal to the rest of the market. It told investors that the appetite for huge, transformative companies is back in full force. It told other private giants that the public markets are hungry. Analysts say we're about to get a lot more stock, more IPOs, more mega debuts, more record-shattering valuations. Think about who else is waiting in the wings. There are other massive private companies eyeing public debuts now that SpaceX proved the demand. Each one could mint new fortunes overnight. The Trillionaire Club might have just opened its doors, and Musk could soon have company. The line that seemed impossible may become almost ordinary in the years ahead. But let's not lose the human drama here. Musk has spent 2 decades being doubted at every turn. Tesla nearly went bankrupt multiple times. SpaceX blew up rockets on the launch pad. Critics called him reckless, called the company's jokes. And now, for one historic afternoon, he stands as the richest person who has ever lived. It's a wild arc. Whether you love him or can't stand him, the story is undeniable. He bet everything on industries everyone said were impossible to win. Electric cars, private space flight. He held his ownership tight instead of cashing out early. And that patience, that concentration of risk, is exactly what catapulted him past the $1 trillion mark when the markets aligned. Still, the fortune is fragile. Tesla stock swings violently on news, on competition, on Musk's own headlines. SpaceX now faces public scrutiny it never had as a private company. Quarterly numbers, profit pressure, investor demands. All of it lands on the world's first trillionaire. The crown is heavy, and the market is always watching. Here's the part most people miss. The trillionaire title can disappear as fast as it appeared. A bad earnings report, a broken peace deal, a recession scare. Any of these could knock hundreds of billions off in a single day. Being a trillionaire today does not guarantee being one tomorrow. It's a snapshot, not a permanent state. So what should you take away from all of this? The headline is the trillionaire, but the real lesson is about ownership. The people who build the most wealth aren't trading in and out for quick wins. They own pieces of transformative companies and hold them through the chaos, the crashes, and the doubt, until the market finally agrees. It's also a lesson about how fast the world is changing. The first billionaire took centuries of capitalism to appear. The first trillionaire arrived just decades later, riding rockets and electric cars and artificial intelligence. The pace of wealth creation is accelerating. The records we just set will probably look small in another 10 years. And for ordinary investors, the SpaceX moment is a reminder that the biggest moves often come from owning the future early. You don't need $1 trillion to play, but understanding why these mega companies command such value can change how you think about your own money, your own bets, and the wild markets we all live in today. So there it is, the world's first trillionaire, crowned in a single afternoon by a record-shattering SpaceX IPO and a market exploding on peace hopes. A fortune so large it rivals nations, yet so fragile it could shrink in a day. A symbol of an era where ownership of the future is worth more than anything else. The big question now is whether this trillion holds, or whether it becomes a footnote in a market that giveth and taketh away. Will SpaceX justify the valuation? Will the peace deal survive? Will more trillionaires follow? We'll be watching every twist, because in this economy, the impossible keeps becoming normal faster than anyone expects. If this story blew your mind, you need to be subscribed to Money Stories. We break down the biggest money dramas on the planet, the trillions, the crashes, the surprising wins, and the people behind them. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and drop a comment telling us if you think this trillionaire crown will last. See you in the next one.